Welcome to the Ground Investigation podcast. Scarlett, how are you doing today?
Very well, thanks, Michael. How are you?
I am not bad, thank you very much. So, as always, I was wondering if you could just go for a general introduction of yourself, really, to get things going.
Yeah, so hi everyone, my name's Scarlett Mummery. I guess my current position is that of COO of Ondine Surveys. My background, I guess more in a work context, is that of geotechnical engineering. I started working offshore back in 2013, and have been within that field of work ever since. So worked across the globe on various projects and various industries, from deep water, oil and gas, drilling through to most recently sort of more in the offshore renewable energy sector.
Sure. Was geology something you were always interested in as a kid, or was it more the engineering side?
I don't know, actually. I think for me, as a person, I'm a very outdoorsy person, so I guess I was always interested in being outside, if you know what I mean, doing something physical. And I think that kind of bridged into the whole geology interest. I was always into geography, I guess. That was probably my main stance at school. There was never really too much geology emphasis, and that led into that initial interest. And I was on quite a versatile degree with modules you could select. It was actually the field trips that really excited me. And
I was just about to say I was exactly the same. The field trips, and what kind of got me into geology was the pictures initially of the people on the field trips and the landscapes, and I thought I'll have a go at that one then. That's essentially what got me into it.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Excellent.
And physical. There's something exciting about that. That's what interested me, was when we were going on these trips and physically looking at things and physically, touching, I know it sounds weird to some people, mud and rock and soil, but there's something unique about that.
There is, and there's such a time span of age, really, with the rocks. You could be looking at rocks that are a billion years old. Yeah. That's definitely part of it. Or it was for myself as well. So you went to university 2010 to 2013. Before you graduated, you've done some work experience for Fugro as an offshore lab technician. How did you get that opportunity?
That was actually, I guess I have my mum to thank for that. I remember she sent me a picture of a job advert. And it was for a geotechnical engineer, and I think anything with the word geo in, my mum assumed that could be of interest for me. So I actually reached out to them and got in touch and said, look, I'm not actually going for your advertised job. I'm working towards that, but do you have any sort of work experience? And they came back and said, yeah, actually, we're really busy with some samples in the lab. And conveniently, when I was back at home, I lived only 20 minutes away from their lab, and they said, do you want to come in for the summer, and we'll introduce you to sort of more the standard soil testing, and then bridging into a little bit of the logging side of stuff. So it was my first introduction into the technician side of the samples that had been retrieved offshore, and it was incredibly interesting and beneficial, and it did confirm that initial interest and sort of idea of going offshore, and definitely, I suppose I was then starting to initially think about what I wanted to do for my dissertation, and I definitely wanted to focus that around something to do with the offshore sector. So it was a good confirmation exercise, but I would definitely push for people while they're doing their studies to try and get any sort of work experience you can. Hopefully something relevant, but it will allow you to stand out. And I definitely found that in my first interview, like we're talking about today, Michael, it's just a conversation point, and it's beneficial for sure.
What is it about the offshore that's particularly attractive to you then?
I think, well, I come from a fishing family, so I've always had that love for the ocean, I guess, and I knew I didn't want to be a fisherman. But I come from the east coast to the UK, where a lot of people work offshore. It was actually more a lot of my friends' dads and things like that I'd heard of working offshore as drillers and all sorts. So there was always that sort of background knowledge of the industry that was there, and that's what led me into it. And my mum, again, linking back to her, I have a lot to thank her for, I guess. She had a fish restaurant, and it was right on the marina in Lowestoft. And she had a guy come in one day and said, well, you look very smart and not like some of these other drillers and things we get in. What do you do for a job? And he said, actually, I'm a surveyor. And that was what got me interested in the whole, the hydrographic, the geology, the geophysical division of offshore, as opposed to what you stereotypically, I guess, think of working offshore might be like. And that sort of guided my interest. And then I started researching, and it just, sounded perfect.
Sure. What's a surveyor?
So I think for this guy, his background was that of the hydrographic side. So he was more of an online surveyor. So he was on the vessels. They were very similar to what Ondine does. So he was out doing the bathymetry surveys. So it was multi-beam echo sounders, side scan sonars, and magnetometers. Those sorts of works he was involved in. Basically, the initial stages before the geotech part of the campaign.
So then after that, you've taken a full-time role after graduating. What sort of projects were you on at Guardline?
Yeah, so that was actually the funny thing is Guardline and Fugro were so positioned right near each other in Great Yarmouth, and I always had the intentions to go and work for Fugro first of all because I really enjoyed the work experience with them. But coincidentally, they were on a recruitment freeze just as I graduated. So I thought I'd give it a hand at Guardline and see if they'll take me on, and they did, and it was a great company to definitely get your foot in the industry with. There was a few others that got recruited at a similar time to myself that were fresh graduates, and they're very good for that initial exposure. So trying to think, actually no, my first project offshore was off the east coast of the UK, which was great, and it was on Galloper Wind Farm. So it's nice to see it actually existing now, and the fact that we were there back at those initial site investigation stages is pretty cool to see something materialise. But I went all over with those guys. I went and did some interesting work in Norway. I remember that project. That was great. That was sort of deep water investigation work over there. And then I've been over to sort of the west coast of Africa with them in Gabon. That was doing some ROV work and some CPTs and sampling with them. So they're a really diverse company, and I've been over a few continents, I guess, with them. It was interesting time. Sure.
So then after this, you've gone on to work freelance for Benthic, I think it was after that. How did you go about doing that then? Because it's quite brave, because you only had about a year's experience, I suppose, onshore, offshore with Guardline.
Yeah, no, I know they say you should get a few more years under your belt, and to be honest, you probably should. I think there was a little bit of luck involved with that, and I did have a mutual friend who was working for Benthic at the time, which I think always helps. And it's a very small industry, the offshore survey industry. So be a nice person, because you never know who you're going to end up on a boat with again. So it's I have that to thank. And I think like I said, Guardline was a great step into the industry. But an opportunity came around that I thought, well, I'm still young. I was only 21 at the time. I think I was then turning 22. I didn't really have too many responsibilities. So I guess I could be maybe a little bit more reckless in a decision compared to some, and I thought, well, I might as well go for it. And it was actually the best job of my life that I went on to, and it was working in Canada.
Really?
In Kitimat. Yeah, it was.
Wow.
Oh, it was in the Douglas Channel, and we were doing some seabed drilling there, and it was just beautiful. Like the tree line either side of where we were working, and there was the logging industry, so they were, passing us every day with the logs, and it was salmon season, so there's literally physical salmon jumping out the water and bears on the side. Like it was pretty surreal. Yeah, so it was a decision that I did fully consider, but I think it was a case of fortunate timing and a lack of major responsibility in my life at that age that allowed me to do it, and it luckily worked out.
Yeah, sure. Canada's somewhere I've always wanted to go. I haven't got there yet, but hopefully I'll get there. In terms of freelance, I think I was working for one of the ground investigation contractors, and then after 5 months had it in my notice and went to work on HS2, which to me just seemed like a no-brainer because the money was so much more.
It is.
You're right. You can miss out on some of the training, but if you take responsibility for yourself, you can always put yourself through training. You can sort of force someone, I suppose, to be your mentor if you get on with someone. What about freelance work was sort of different to permanent for yourself? What are the pros and cons, would you say?
Well, I suppose I only have the role with Guardline to compare it to, and it's a lot about contract type. So that was one of my reasons for actually opting for the freelance now of Guardline, was because I think back then I think they call it a 120-day contract, and essentially do 120 days offshore, and you only earn back your time in lieu, which was your weekends and bank holidays. So you're actually doing a lot of time away for not much time off, and then you're back in the office. So for me, it was just that control over when I was going away and how much time I was having off. I actually ended up having like half the year off, which was fantastic. So
Yeah.
that was the big side and draw for me. Obviously, like you said, the money is better, but with that comes risk. You know what I mean? Like, you're not always going to have work. Being a freelancer, it depends on the market. And I remember some good advice someone said to me when I first turned freelance: have a year's salary in the bank and always keep it there, because it swings and roundabouts in this industry. Because it might seem great, you know what I mean, make hay when the sun shines, but there are downturns, there are tricky times, and just make sure you have that buffer just in case. And I felt that in, I think it was 2015, 2016, when the oil price stacked it, and all of us were struggling to get work. This is you know what I mean, before the renewable sector kicked off, where everyone's super busy at the moment, but it was definitely peaks and troughs of work.
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, it's very wise advice to have a year. I don't think I've ever had a whole year's salary in the
I
bank.
think it's a nice idea.
Yeah. No, it's takes a sensible human being, I think, to have a whole year's salary in the bank, and I'm not sure that's me. Yeah, definitely. No, don't never have that much sitting there, I suppose. So it's something that you would advise people to have a go at least once in your life. I know what you're saying in terms of risk, but you know, to me, risk is a little bit exciting. For me, to go to the same job, the same money, you know, the same locations, or even if you're traveling around, but still the same company, the same office, is a little bit dull. But what's your opinion?
No, I agree, and I suppose I look at it from a different point of view now, being an employer. We've got our survey campaigns happening. We kind of operate on a mixture. We do have, you know, I mean, employees and contractors involved with our site surveys. So I think it's all down to personal circumstances. There's some that are after, you know, I mean, that stability. It might aid a mortgage, or you never know what people have going on in their lives. Where for some, it's, you know, I mean, the freelance world works and they can chase the cash and, you know, I mean, jump around on projects and have that excitement.
Yeah.
So I think if you're in a position to try it, and equally if you're after something a bit more stable, then it's like anything, pros and cons for both, definitely.
Yeah, no, it's great because, you know, you can try your time with one company, you know, finish a project there, go to another company, so you can have exposure to several different companies. The money's better, the freedom, perhaps, you know, more of the office side and developing yourself probably lacks a little bit, I would say, as mentioned a moment ago. But apart from that, you know, my own personal opinion, it's all kind of upside, but it very much depends on the person. Some people are very risk averse. Some people like, you know, happy to endure some risk in their lives.
Definitely down to the individual, and it depends. I think it's hard. I think it's always important to have, maybe, I know everyone says a 5-year plan, the cliche of that, but that can be the driver behind whether you go freelance or full time as well, and just to be sure to have that vision and see where it suits and where it works best, for sure.
Sure. Are you a well-planned person who has a vision, or the inkling of one at least?
I used to think I did. I loved offshore. I always did give myself a bit of a gap, being a female. I want to have children. I said when I get to 30, I'd have a bit of a big, you know, I mean, reconsidering what I wanted to do. But then Ondine came along before that. So I think there's part of me that it's all very well and good having a plan, but life can bring around some, you know what I mean, surprises that I never saw coming. So it's, I think, organised to a point.
Yeah, no, definitely. You can be organised, but things happen. But I suppose it does, having a plan and then having it readjusted is better than having no plan. I think you tend to you'll get further on with whatever you're trying to do, essentially. So I'm just going to ask, in relation to what you did after that, was you went to Mott MacDonald. So you've basically gone from freelance offshore, then you've gone back onshore on a permanent role too. So that was a bit of a change. And in that role, part of your tasks was geotechnical design of foundations and earth retaining systems. So that's quite a change for yourself there.
It was a big change, and I'll be brutally honest, this is when the downturn happened, and I had a mortgage.
Okay.
And it was
all right.
And it was convenient for me. And they're a great company, don't get me wrong, and I have some friends from there still. It was Yeah, it was the downturn. There was not much opportunity for works offshore, and I said I had a mortgage to pay. And conveniently, they were based in Norwich, so it was sort of commuting distance from where I was living. And it was fine. It was never the job for me. But yeah, this part was it did make me appreciate the other side of things, because you are a little bit disconnected working offshore. You're there and you're doing the acquisition side of for the data process, but then I got a bit more of an appreciation of what actually happens and a bit more exposure to the steps that follow that from an onshore engineering point of view. So it's never a wasted experience. It was never the job I was ever going to stick at forever, but it bridged into the onshore stuff, actually. There's a road scheme around Norwich City Centre called the NDR, and I was part of the site investigation team that were there doing the onshore drilling. So I'd never done onshore drilling before, so that was interesting exposure. So yeah, that was just a change that was more circumstantial than choice, but nonetheless, you always learn from stuff. It was interesting.
Yeah, sure, definitely more in office time, I presume.
It was,
especially in relation to
first 9 to 5 proper job.
Yeah,
yeah.
Fair enough. So, did you, in relation to the geotechnical design in retainer systems, is that something you learned in your degree? I can't imagine it was.
It wasn't, no, it was just part of the team that got stuck with me, really. They were working on this, and I was feeding more into that from more the parameter side and, the interpretation of the data from offshore and bits and bobs like that. So it was there more of a support role to the actual engineers, yeah.
Okay, so you weren't actually desiging anything at this point. You were just sort of doing
not that capable.
The other part, feeding the information
not
in.
There, yeah.
I was going to say Yeah, and I was going to say, if you didn't do any degree, then you must have picked it up fairly quick, to actually go there and start that quickly.
Yeah.
So then in December 2016, you went back offshore, back into freelance with CJAX, an assistant project manager, and you've worked with other offshore companies since then. Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, so that was just a case of things were picking up a little bit in the industry, and I was eager to get back offshore, and this was sort of a role that appeared. So yeah, I worked for CJAX for a little while, doing sort of their project management, project engineering on. I was responsible for one of their jack-up vessels, the CJAX Kraken, and it was an interesting project to work on. I was only with them for a few months, and then I got really back into the deep sea oil and gas seabed drilling, which I was very passionate about. So I guess that was sort of bridging in 2017, and then from that point onwards, it was a mixture of jobs with the prod system that Benthic own, subsea side of things, and then also freelance for others to drill ships, and we were doing CPTs and borehole sampling and those types of bits. Yes, I was back in the full swing of the offshore stuff. Okay, so
what is it that sort of excites you, or you're more, makes you more passionate about the oil and gas? Is it that it's further offshore and it's deeper? What is that?
I think it wasn't necessarily back then. It was the predominant sector to work in. There was not so much in ORE compared to nowadays. But for me, it was the technology that I was working with. It was the prod system, and to see something launched off the deck of a vessel and then working and operating down at 2,500 meters of water column was just incredibly interesting. And then to go and work with the same system in Africa, outside of the water column, on tracks, drilling in 0 meters of water column, again, was just the contrast in what this kit could do. So it was the technology I enjoyed working with, and just the excitement, I guess, around the innovation that had been put into the design and led to its success.
Sure. What is the prod system?
So prod is an acronym for a portable remotely operated drill, and it's heavily patented, and it's owned by Benthic, and it was firstly developed. I'm going to get the timelines completely wrong, but back I think in 2000 by a group of engineers who were finalising their degree at Sydney University, and they came up with the prod system, and then essentially it got some interest through financial backing, and it became a reality, and then a commercial drill. So they have prod 1, 2 and 3, and they're recently building another system to add to their portfolio of drills. So it's an interesting story behind the system, and it was it's an impressive bit of kit, because it's all from the environmental side as well. It's so low impact in comparison to some of the other conventional, big old drill ships out there. And it's less invasive on the seabed as well. It's a cool bit of kit.
How does it work? I'm trying to figure out in my head how this works. If it's not attached to a ship.
Yeah. So,
in simple terms.
In a 101 summary of it, right? So it's sort of a metal structure it's got a couple of carousels on it. And within one carousel is all the drill pipe and casing. In the other carousel is sort of the piston samplers, the rotary corers, and the CPTs. So you'll launch off a large system off generally the stern of a vessel, and all of this is operated by the drillers in a container, and it's all opto technology, all through fibres, and it's impressive. It's through the click of a mouse that you're operating this drilling system. So you launch it off the stern of the vessel, for example, lower it through the water column, land it on the seabed. It's got generally 3 feet that you stabilise based on the terrain that's there. And it's got sort of literally an arm system is probably the best way to describe it in basic terms. An arm will come out, go to the slot that you're identifying it to, pull out the casing, for example, attach through the hole, and drilling element kicks in then, so you control rotary torque and water, all the drilling parameters it's all on this opto screen, just levers that the guys are operating with a mouse, and you put your casing through, and then you deploy your sampler or your CPTs, so you've got that, and then through virgin ground you do your test, run your casing, get to another point of virgin ground, test or sampling, then run your casing. So it's the same concept of a drill ship, but it's all done, not remotely, but through operators in a container. It's incredible. There's no, roughnecks or anything on the back deck, slinging tools and, pipe coming along the work deck or anything. It's all happening below the water column. Yeah,
it sounds fascinating. It sounds like a very different driller for clicking a mouse.
It is, yeah. Well, they still like to live up to the stereotype, some of them, take it. I guess it's from a QHSE point of view as well. It's a lot safer. You've got all the people off the deck. They're within the container operating with a mouse. So that drilling system and the risk involved with that is down on the seabed. Yeah, no,
it sounds ideal. It sounds like a perfect drilling job, to be honest. If it's raining, you still keep nice and warm and dry.
Yeah. Well, like it does have its constraints, though, and it's all come down to the geology side of things. Obviously, with the excessive water depths, generally, hopefully, comes some lovely, uniform clays and things, which the prod system excels in.
Yeah.
But with more granular material, it's harder to retain and harder to sample, and it's a little bit more challenging, but still works well enough. So it has its restraints by any means, just like a drill ship does as well.
So what have been some of the best projects that you've ever worked on?
Oh, right. Where would we start? I guess definitely the one we touched on earlier, the one in Canada, that was more, I guess, just for the setting.
Yeah.
I think probably I'm a bit biased to judge my projects on location as opposed to the work.
Yeah, I think I would.
Yeah, so I think that was a pretty cool one. And then there was another one, I think it was back in, when would it be? It would have been, I think it was around 2019. Yeah, 2019. So I went to Australia working as well for Chevron on some projects out there. That was a really cool experience as well. I worked in St. Croix, off the island of St. Croix in the US Virgin Islands, doing again some subsea drilling with the prod system out there. That was just beautiful as well. But it's all of them have their different charms and experiences. Like, it's interesting. I suppose not the best project I've ever been on, but to see a change in a place. I worked out in Mozambique back in, I think initially the first one was was 2017 or 2018. For Anadarko, I'm working, it's the biggest gas reserve in the world, so it was an incredible project to be on with those guys. And it was a beautiful, beautiful place. We were in and out of Masimba to Praia, incredibly safe, and I really enjoyed my time there. And it was a big holiday destination for people as well. But then to go back there, I think I was back there, I think it was 2000, I think it was it would have been 2019, so a couple of years later, and to see the change in the place, it's devastating, and it's not safe anymore, it's not as beautiful, and that appeal goes. So it's interesting. It's not the best project I've ever been on, but I'm grateful that I've been part of it, and I've seen that change in a country, like that exposure. That's the other side of it, is the risk element, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I suppose that it definitely is. So in terms of projects then, what project do you think you've learned the most on whilst doing it, and why?
Oh gosh. Learn the most. I don't know actually. I suppose you learn different elements on all of them. I suppose some are more challenging from a client point of view, so you build on a skill set of how to deal with the client. Some, the people you're working with can be a little bit more challenging, and you can learn from that. But I think probably
technically challenging. Then what's been the most technically challenging?
Oh, I'm terrible.
That one get you as well.
All these projects. I think technically anything with some rotary coring involved with it is always just that little bit harder.
Yeah,
it's just a little bit more extensive. There's been a few that we've been involved with that have been a bit more challenging, but technical wise, there's none that really stand out too much for me, to be honest. But
okay.
I think the most challenging project actually I've ever been on, and sorry to deviate from the technical side of it, was
That's fine.
when COVID hit. And I was offshore.
Yeah.
I was working out in Trinidad and Tobago, and we were offshore there. Well, we were offshore Guyana. We were mobbing in and out of Trinidad and working out offshore Guyana. But we left the port. This is sort of around the front end of March, and then they closed Trinidad and Tobago. They wouldn't let us back in. Then we tried Barbados. They wouldn't let us back in. Guyana wouldn't let us back in. Everywhere shut their commercial airports. And to be stuck offshore with a group of people trying to work and not knowing what's going on in the world and when you're going home. Wow. That was the most challenging project I've ever been on. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet it was. That must have had a heavy mental impact on yourself and the others on board.
Yeah, massively. And
I was going to say, how did you cope with that then? So did you have outside communications at least?
Yeah, we had the Wi-Fi and bits and bobs like that, and the client was very good about it. And I mean, we tried to work where we could. Understandably, I think it turned out to be half the crew were very insistent that they wanted to get home immediately. So there was a lot of discussions on how do we get checked. Do we go down to 12-hour ops instead of 24-hour ops? Try and get people home.
Yeah.
It was definitely a tricky time for that, but fortunately, the people I was working with, because I've been working for Benthic as a freelancer for quite a few years by then, we all were very close, working with each other for multiple years. So it was. Luckily, we had the support of each other. We were all a familiar crew, but it was a very mentally challenging time, I guess. And it was interesting to see how people react in the situation. There was a few individuals that I thought would be a little bit more cool, calm and collected and weren't, which is completely fine. But until you get in a situation where there is a bit of uncertainty and I guess a bit of panic, especially when we were running out of options on, how to get people off and home, is a pretty scary thought. Yeah,
and I can imagine, because there was widespread panic, spreading around. So there's never any danger of not having enough supplies on there before you got people off. Then that wasn't the case.
Yeah, we weren't getting too critical, but I think it turned into nearly 3 months of report. Like, it was a long trip.
Wow.
So it was. Yeah. It was. I can't really. We did Barbados. They did allow us to come in and we can get supplies, but we weren't allowed to offside.
Okay.
So we were able to access and get stores and supplies and things. But I remember there's a picture of us actually. There's a sign in the port of Barbados with Barbados in these giant letters, and we're all standing there, and that was as far as we could go.
Nearly there.
Yeah, but I felt I was okay. The UK, I know that we went into lockdown, but working as a seafarer with a discharge book, then I could travel home. They were pretty good with that, but. A lot of the crew were, because Benthic's an Australian founded company, I guess, with a lot of the drillers are from there. Australia was really strict and closing its borders very quickly. So for them, there was a massive concern. And there was actually a couple of guys who couldn't get home at all. And they came and stayed with me in Norfolk for, one of them was up to 6 months, because he lives in Thailand. They've got a wife and children there, and they wouldn't let him back because he didn't have a Thai passport.
Wow, that's interesting. Well, I've just been travelling around Thailand for the last 10 months. And even when they relented with the masks and everything here in the UK, still over there, you still had to. Most people didn't.
Yes.
But there were still signs up, and if we went to immigration to extend, then they were quite adamant. Forget that they were going past on their motorbikes at 80 miles an hour with no helmets on, and a 6-month-old baby. But no, they didn't actually. They never wore helmets, but they always religiously had masks on.
It's crazy.
I think the risk is a bit more from the roads, especially when you're going the wrong way. That definitely seems a bit riskier to me.
Yeah, it's so, funny. world at the moment as well, I guess we're pretty relaxed still here in the UK with it, but it's still a consideration with projects. Like we have a full COVID policy still, and have to manage that through changes on signing and off signing. It's still as much as in the day to day. I guess living in England, it's not such a big thing. But it's still something you have to think about, especially with marine operations. Yeah, it
is. I think when people mention it now, it's kind of really. I thought this was kind of it was gone, but the last time I looked at it was 1 in 37. But you never know when something else is going to happen. No. The next new wave, of, something's mutated and potentially back. But let's fingers crossed that will not happen anyway.
Fingers crossed, yeah, definitely.
Excellent. So then after that, you went on to work as a client rep for the offshore renewables. What are your main duties when doing such a role?
So I guess the day-to-day being a client rep, this is my first exposure actually with the offshore renewable sector. So it was interesting to see the different, well, it's not that much, it's not that different to the sort of deep water work. It's the same goal. But I guess being the client rep when you're offshore is, well, every project has a specification and you're kind of the eyes and ears on the vessel for the client, just making sure that the contractor is completing the works to the specification that's been agreed and outlined contractually, and also, obviously in the most efficient and productive manner as well for the campaign, and working with the variables of weather, site constraints, geology constraints to make sure that productivity continues the best it can. So I guess for a day-to-day kind of thing, there's a few meetings involved. There's meetings on board the vessel with the master and often the project manager from the contracting side, but then there's also a dial-in daily as well with the onshore project management for both the contractor side and also the client side that you're there representing. So it's a combination of being on deck. It's very different. It's very hands-off, which I found odd on my first ever rotation. I'm used to being on the back deck and helping people out where I can, where as in the client rep, you're there to observe the contractors, make sure that they're completing works to the standard that you need them to, and just be that overall governing body, I would guess. And if there's anything going wrong, you're there for immediate consultation with, just to not slow the project up, because if you didn't have that representation on board, it would often wait till the morning, and then you have to speak to onshore and get their input, and where it was needed. But sometimes you can work around things. It could be in the middle of the night and things aren't going well, but you can come up with plan B on the spot. So you're there to essentially keep things running when to the standard you need them to, but also essentially at the end of the day sign off on the work of the contractor and make sure that it's in line with the contracts involved. Yeah.
I mean, the only thing I really know too much about that is the money's better, isn't it? In terms of if you're a client rep, especially an offshore client rep, it jumps a bit from being the geotechnical engineer or being in the lab, etc.
It does. Yeah, no, it's a bit compared to where you start off with when you're early days entering the industry as a geotech engineer. Yeah. I guess there's stages, and like with any career, there's progression. For me, that path was sort of the lab tech trainee doing my work experience, then the geotechnical engineer, then to the lead geotech engineer monitoring, the 4 people on that shift, bridging into again the offshore project manager above that, and then finally, I guess the client representation side. And with all of that is added responsibility, and I guess that's reflected in the pay, definitely. So, and don't get me wrong, it's wonderful. And it's great that I enjoyed my job, but at the end of the day, we're all there to be paid and for life outside of work. And it's a big increase, and I can't complain.
No, 100%. No one's there for the love of it. Well, you might love it anyway, but it helps to be paid. So what would you say the differences are in terms of the health and safety between on and offshore? What's the kind of main things?
I guess it's a bit more stringent offshore, I would say. I've got very limited exposure, I guess, from the onshore side of it, so I don't want to speak too confidently. But for the offshore side, it's paramount, QHSE, and it's a huge. It's a culture. You have to be with the right company and make sure that culture's there and taken, and it's everyone's buying into it essentially, and actually actively partaking and being safe. So there's more of an emphasis, in my opinion, just working offshore. But I guess there's more risk and more exposure offshore as well with some of the equipment, depending on your project. but it's a big element, and I think there's been a lot of lessons learned the hard way, be it with oil and gas, with incidents that have happened. So there's this whole sort of stop work authority and culture that exists nowadays, and it's great to see that the QHSE side of things offshore is continuing to evolve, and standards and practices are in place, but it's really highly considered and taken very seriously.
What are the living quarters like on a vessel?
It varies, trust me. Oh gosh.
Yeah.
It depends what project you're on and what vessel you happen to get. So yeah. I've been in some cabins where I've been sharing with others, and I remember I was on one boat and oh god, it was so noisy. I was above the bow thrusters, and then I was sharing a bathroom with 6 other men, and oh god, it was
yeah.
awful. But I think again with that, it's your rank, and think, well, it's not your rank, but you know what I mean, your role. I guess things are still very much like that offshore. There is a hierarchy, which I guess works in that environment. So. When you become a client rep, you often get a fantastic cabin. So
really?
You get a cabin to yourself, and sometimes they have their own living room area, and it's very comfortable. But I used to, I don't know, it's a bit strange, but I used to take my own bed linen and a towel with me. I just had this funny thing about others. So I think it's what you make of it. And some boats are way more comfortable than others, and it's part of the parcel. You know, it's never going to be the Ritz. No,
that's it. And I suppose that a new flashy vessel is always going to be better than a really old one.
Definitely.
But yeah, so it's part and parcel.
I think some of that is the important thing is the food. And we've got a vessel on charge, so the Commander Iona with Ondine, and the food and it's an older vessel, but the rooms are massive actually, and fortunately everyone's got their own cabin on there for our crew, which is great. But it's the food, and I'm a big believer in that. Yeah. You can have not the best cabin or shower sharing or whatever, but if you're giving people some decent food and you have it's a really good galley crew and chef that are passionate about that, you look forward to it each day, and it compensates massively. So you can suck it up with a terrible shower if you're having a fantastic dinner.
So you mentioned the company. So it's a company which you started called Ondine in 2021. Can you tell us a little bit about that company?
Yeah, so Ondine's an Irish-based marine and aerial survey company that we started, myself and 2 others, back in 2021. And it's very well positioned and focused on the emerging ORE market in Ireland. So we've got sort of the 4 main departments really, which are the environmental side of things and survey works, the aerial division which bridges into that. We've been doing a lot of geophysical surveys throughout 2022, and we've got the geotech knowledge and background which we're hoping to bridge into in 2023, and we've also got a data department, because that's one of the key things with setting up Ondine is, yes, we are an aerial marine sort of acquisition company, but we want to be known as a data company as well, because best in class data is what we're all about delivering to our clients. Yeah.
What is ORE?
Oh, Offshore Renewable Energy. Sorry, I'm terrible for these acronyms.
I thought it was that. I just thought I'd confirm just in case someone's listening and they're not entirely sure, in case they've never done any offshore, which like myself.
Yeah, sorry, I forget about that.
So what made you sort of decide to start the company in the first place then? Because it's a very entrepreneurial move. It's certainly riskier. So what was it that inspired that?
Oh, I think I have my business partners to thank for that. So they're actually involved in ORE, Offshore Renewable Energy Development themselves. So they're part of a large portfolio of works in Ireland, comprising of 6 potential sites. So to get those to the planning stages, there's a lot of site investigation survey works that need to be completed, and there's a limited amount of resources, personnel and companies to be able to do that. So it started the conversation around between those guys starting up a survey company, and then Kate got hold of me back last year and we discussed it and never looked back. Yeah.
So did you help form the name or come up with a name for the company, or how was that decided?
Yeah, we did. We took some time actually with that one. It's very difficult to name a company. Like it's not as easy as you think. And Yeah, we was a female-led company. So Kate's the CEO and I'm the COO. So it was always something we're very proud of, and it's very different for the offshore sector. We're the first sort of female-led company on that front. So we were having a look around for names. Ondine, yeah, thank you. Ondine stuck, and it's sort of, I think it's mainly a French name. It's got a bit of Latin influence, but it's a female name, and it sort of translates to little wave or. Wave of water, and there was something about that, and I think with the female link of us two, that it just stuck. And coincidentally, we found out this afterwards. There is an Irish film called Ondine, and it's got Colin Farrell in it. Really? I need to actually fully watch this movie, but it's about sort of a mermaid that gets caught in its net and all this sort of stuff. So that was just luck and coincidence that we're an Irish company, and there was an Irish movie called Ondine. So yeah, that's kind of the background to it.
Okay, so one of the things you mentioned to me earlier on is that Ondine has recently purchased a plane to go along with two other vessels. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this was back in, it was our first asset actually. So we took ownership of I've learned a lot. I've gone from geotech to aerial surveys. So we purchased our first plane back in 2021, which is a P68 Observer, which is a purpose-built plane for aerial imagery surveys. There's a hatch in the base of it where you put your camera system. Yeah. You fly transects along the sites that they would like to eventually build a wind farm. And what we do with the plane is it's 2 years of monitoring, and we do one flight a month over these sites, and you're basically taking the amount of data that comes off the plane is just incredible. And we have an ornithology department which take this data, filter the data, and do the identification of the birds and the marine mammals taken from these flights. And then we produce biannual reports monitoring the flight height and distribution and all this fantastic stuff with the birds. I'm not as au fait as our team on that, but we've got a great team of experts that are doing that, and all of that information feeds into the environmental impact assessment, which goes to the planning department in order for a developer to get their licensing to build. And in conjunction with that, there's the data for the engineering side from the geophysical and the geotechnical. So it's interesting to see that there's a full package of works that gets completed. So that's why we purchased the plane, to be able to tick the box and feed into those parts for our clients. And then more the marine-based things, which my background was in. We purchased, our first boat that we purchased was the Ondine Jewel, which is named after Kate's daughter Juliet. So that's where that name came from. And it's a 24-metre catamaran, purpose-built. It was previously owned by a company called IX Blue, and she's quite well known in the industry. She used to be called the Felix. And she's a purpose-built, like I was saying, geophysical vessel. So she's very low acoustic. She's fantastic. And she's only 5 years old. So we're very proud to have her. And then the final asset within our fleet is one that we charter from Hayes Ships, which is the Commander Iona. And again, very well known in the industry. She's got a fantastic track record across the globe, really. And we've been busy surveying with her throughout 2022, completing geophysical surveys and ultra high resolution seismic as well from her. So yeah, the asset portfolio is building, and they're all doing well.
It sounds like you have some great toys, to be honest. So you've got a catamaran, a plane, and
a big old 70 survey boat. It is, and the tech and stuff as well. We purchased all brand new sensors and everything at the front end of this year to mob onto the assets as well. So there's some great technology there on board the assets themselves. But I think also interestingly is our data team, who I guess one of the advantages of starting a new company is that you can future-proof things as much as possible. So a lot of our data transfers and how we work is in the cloud, and we have virtual machines, so we can have the best data processors in the world connect to our data center and process our data. You don't have to. We set the company up in the middle of the pandemic, so we've very much gone for that remote working and that remote access to data and the day-to-day side of things, which is great. And we've got a really interesting IT team that are building out on sort of AI learning linked in with the aerial work. So, and data efficiency. So it's some really cool stuff going on. The toys are great, but there's some stuff, really exciting stuff in the background as well on the innovation side and the technology side, which is really exciting.
Do you still ever go offshore yourself still, or you're now sort of stationed in the office?
Life has changed. I do miss it, don't get me wrong. It's but I love the role that I'm in now. It's the most challenging thing I've ever done in life, and it doesn't stop. But I wouldn't
Really?
regret my decision to embark on this with Kate and Michael. So it's definitely a change, and I spent enough time on the boats. Like we've got an office in Arklow in Ireland, which is just south of Dublin, and the boat's been over there while we've been getting works done for her licensing, and been on board a few times, been out for the trials and things like that. But I'm sure if we get some really cool projects, I'll try and put my hand up to be party chief or something on them. But for the time being, it's mostly, well, it is all office based now. So it's it's definitely different.
So one of the questions I've got here is sort of, the hours, I suppose, that you're putting in. Is it a 9 to 5 that you're doing? Is it you're doing many more hours outside of this to get it? Because I'm in a new business, you generally put in a little bit more, don't you, to get it going off the ground, etc.
Yeah, no, it's a lot. It really is. Don't get me wrong, and definitely not 9 to 5. And we have a switch off policy, so all of our staff have the right to switch off. Don't get me wrong, but like starting at any new company, it's a lot of hard work.
Sure.
But we have to put that in these positions to make it work.
It is.
It's a lot of excessive hours. I try and never do anything on a Sunday is my golden rule. But
that's my rule.
It's worth it. I can see the progression, see the growth, and if I look back to where we were when we first started, thinking of a name for a company, let alone completing a survey season now, and the fantastic team that we have brought together. That's what drives you every day, and you don't mind doing the extra time. Like you're tired, but there's always something happening, and it's generally positive. Obviously, things go wrong for any company, but it's challenging. But the drive is there, and I have the team around me to thank for that. Like I'd be lost without them. They're just a massive support and just incredible group of people that, well, we brought together. The idea of Ondine was to bring together some of the best survey specialists in the world, and that's what we've done. And like our survey director, for example, Justin, is based in Canada, and again with us with our remote working and setup, so we've got the exposure and the knowledge of Justin to feed into the company. It's just remarkable what we've brought together as individuals, and I think that's why we've been so successful this year, and we've got an exciting outlook for 2023, which is great.
Excellent. Yeah, it's exciting, isn't it? If you're starting a business and you're writing out, say, the plans of the business, what your vision is, what next year is going to look like, how are you going to do it. These are all things that can, make you hugely motivated to work any extra hours required. Yeah. Because it's coming from yourself and the other founders, and whatever you put into it is going to be the reality if you're putting the work, essentially, I suppose, isn't it? Oh,
definitely. No, and I have some very good advice. My grandfather said to me once, work or want. And I've always had that through, and I think I've always been quite ambitious, but work or want has always stuck with me. It's so simple. And I just believe that we've got a great team. There's so much work in that is going to prove and be a success, and no one else is going to do it for you, kind of thing. So we're lucky on that front. Yeah.
No, that's a great quote, to be honest. That one, work or one, that's absolutely fantastic. Yeah, it is. I constantly try to preach to my children to do this and to do that, and but they never really seem to latch on. I think it's probably because I say it too many times, to be honest. And but so what your main sort of duties there, and what's a kind of typical day for yourself, would you say, if you have one?
They vary each day. There's lots going on. So I guess my main duty is overseeing from the operation side. Depends on what we have at the time. If we've got the plane flying or the vessel survey, it varies on that front. And then there's the business development side as well, and getting the name of Ondine out there. And there's lots of tenders and opportunities for the company as well. So it's feeding in and supporting the team on getting those and delivered across the line. And there's been the other side of it, which I've learned along the way, I guess, with the commercials and the financials of running a business, feeding into those. And I think the general day-to-day is just, it depends on what the priority is that week, and just making sure that I'm there to feed in with the right individuals and offer support as much as I can to the team to, we're all on the same goal and the same path, to try and be as hands-on as possible. And, just make sure everyone's supported and that they have the resource that they need, and we're all working efficiently and successfully.
Right. Thank you very much for your time. It's been really interesting. I think there'll be a lot of people who will think the same. You know, your career so far, where you've been, especially, you know, what you've been doing the last year and a half, where you're going with the business. The fact that you have a catamaran and a plane to play with when you're, you know. Yeah. But you know, honestly, it's been fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing your time and experience with us.
No, thanks for having me. Much appreciated. Nice to go down memory lane, actually. So thanks for that.
And cut.